To see the nods, and that's amazing. Okay. So yeah, I'm Eyal, and I will be showing you guys how to make a cheesecake, which is actually the very first dessert that I ever learned how to make on my own without my mother's help quite a few years ago. So it has a special place in my heart, and I've taken a bunch of recipes that I found online when I started, and I've adapted them a little bit to fit what I need. So I'm going to start, and we start by making the crust. So for the crust, I have some graham crackers that have been like pulverized, right? It's like a powder, so you can put it in a Ziploc bag with a rolling pin, a hand, like whatever, and just smash it so that it becomes like a fine powder. Or you can get it like a pre-powdered version in the grocery store as well if it's too much effort to pound it out yourself, which is totally understandable. So to this, we are going to actually add about a tablespoon of sugar. I don't like to add that much sugar into the crust because I feel like there are other components of the cheesecake that are already sweet. So why make the crust really sweet? I don't care for that. To that, I'm actually going to add about 3/4 of a stick of butter, a little bit more, a little bit less. It kind of depends on how big your pieces of crushed graham crackers are. The finer they are, the more it will absorb. And obviously, the bigger they are, the less they will absorb. But you're looking for the same consistency overall, and I will show you what that is. So after we put some in, we're going to give it a stir. What you're looking for is you're actually looking for the whole mixture to be able to clump up into one, to be able to clump up in your hand. If you can see, it's still pretty powdery and it's not fully coming together. And so then I know I have to add a little bit more butter. You almost want to get it like wet sand. It shouldn't stick together while you're mixing it, but it should definitely come together if you squeeze hard enough. And so you can see here, it definitely holds its shape a little bit better. I still want it a little bit wetter. So this is kind of what you're looking for. It holds its shape fairly well, and then you can still make it into a powder. So yeah, that was about 3/4 of a cup of, or 3/4 a stick of butter to 2 cups of the graham cracker crumbs that I have here. And then what we are going to do is we're going to put that into our 9-inch springform pan. You can use any size springform pans. The ones that most people have are the 9-inch. It's the most common one, but you can definitely put it in like a 10-inch, 11-inch. The recipe will work for all of those. For the 9-inch, the cheesecake will be thicker. For an 11-inch or a 10-inch, the cheesecake will be a little bit thinner, but it's all the exact same. What we're going to do before we put the crust in is we are actually going to put aluminum foil at the bottom of the pan, and we are going to cover up the bottom and the sides of the pan with the aluminum foil. And this is because we bake it in a water bath, and because of how a springform pan works, so you can just take the bottom out. You don't want any water to get inside. It's very important because the crust will be really mushy when it's done. Still tastes delicious, but it might fall apart on you. So what we're going to do is we just take the aluminum foil and you're just going to push it up against the edges fairly high, so that it's covering most of the stuff, like most of the height. You don't want it to be very low, but if it's like this, it's fine as well. It shouldn't really get in. And so to that, we are going to add our graham cracker crust. And you might want to put a little bit less than what you have. You might want to put a little bit. You might want to put all of it. It kind of depends on how thick you want your crust and the size of your pan. And that should be good for now. And I'm just gonna push it down. But one thing I love to do is to either grab a mug or you grab like a measuring cup. I have a measuring cup that I lost the little end on. So I just take that all around the crust and I just push it down, trying to make it as even as possible. And you really want to make sure that you get those edges packed. You don't want this to fall apart because it's not packed enough. So it's really important to get it packed more than getting it even. You want it even, but it's better to get it packed. So if it's packed and then some are thicker, some part of it is thinner, that's totally okay. So once we pack it in, and it shouldn't take you too long, it should look like this. It's fully packed at the bottom and it's coming up the edges a little bit. Again, just for extra stability and to make sure that none of the cheesecake batter, when we put it in, goes into the cracks of the 9-inch springform pan. For this, we are going to put it in the oven at 350 for 10 minutes. And that's just to set the pan or to set the crust. You don't want the crust, again, to fall apart. And if you don't bake it, to set it in place, it will fall apart once you finish your whole cheesecake.
We have a question, Eyal. Can we make the cheesecake ahead of time and freeze it?
You can. The cheesecake will, it does freeze well. You can cut it up into slices and freeze each individual slice. If you have enough space in your freezer, I never do, but if you do, you can put the whole cheesecake in the freezer. Really for as long as you want. I would just take it out if it's the whole cheesecake, take it out about 3 to 4 hours at least before you are planning on serving it, so it can completely thaw out. But yes, you can put it in the freezer. So once that is in the oven, it is time to start our filling, which comes together much quicker than you might think. So in here, I have 4 bricks of cream cheese. This is the Philadelphia brand cream cheese, but it really doesn't matter what brand you use as long as it's cream cheese. And I'm putting that into my stand mixer. You can do this with a hand mixer. You can do it by hand with a whisk. It would be very, very hard, but you definitely can do it. One of the reasons why we say to make sure every single ingredient is at room temperature. Not only is it easier to combine if you do need to use that whisk, but also it makes sure that your cheesecake doesn't crack. You can never really stop your cheesecake if it does crack, but by making sure the ingredients are at room temperature, making sure that you cook it in a water bath, those are just some things that you can do to stop it from cracking as much as you can.
We have a couple more questions, if I may interrupt. We have another question about freezing. If you do want to freeze it, should you use saran wrap or tin foil or a Ziploc bag? What's kind of the best way to cover it?
I would cover it with tin foil personally. That's what I would do. I wouldn't put it in a Ziploc bag just because if it is, if you're putting it in the freezer from just letting it refrigerate, putting it in a Ziploc bag will smush the edges in, and so you kind of don't want that. If you take a knife around the edge of your springform pan and the cheesecake just to release it from the edge a bit, then you can either pop off the sides of the springform pan and put aluminum foil around the entire thing, or you can put aluminum foil around the top of the pan, keeping the sides on, and then once it's defrosted fully, the sides should pop off just the exact same as if you do it right out of the fridge.
Great. And we have another question. Is light cream cheese something we can use?
Light cream cheese is something you can use. I don't know why I said it like that. It is something you can use. It's cream cheese. It is something you can use. The only difference between light cream cheese and regular cream cheese obviously is like the amount of fat inside of it, which for some recipes might be an issue. For this recipe, it's not as much of an issue. although light cream cheese does tend to be a little bit softer than a full fat cream cheese. So when we get to the step, when we put the flour in, you might just want to increase the amount of flour just by a couple tablespoons, just to get it to the consistency that we're looking for. So to the 4 bricks of cream cheese, I'm going to add about 1.25 cups, 1.5 cups of sugar. The most amount of sugar in this recipe is in the filling, obviously. That's why with the rest of the parts of the cheesecake, I try to put as little amount of sugar as possible, because I don't think cheesecake needs to have that much sugar to taste really good. I'm going to put this in my stand mixer, starting at low speed, and I'm going to go up to about a medium high, and we're going to let that spin. And you want it to really cream with the sugar. You want it to be really smooth, and you don't want there to be any thick pieces of the brick of cream cheese. You're going to get to a point in time where cream cheese is just going to start coming up on the edges, and it's not really going to come down and incorporate. So you just want to get a spoon, a spatula, whatever you have lying around that you can just kind of take those pieces of cream cheese that are stuck up on the side and put it down into the center so that you can continue mixing it so that it can be smooth.
And if we're using a gluten-free crust, what type of crumb crust do you recommend?
So I actually made a gluten-free one this morning. A friend is gluten-free and they wanted one. And so I used the Glutino Oreos, the gluten-free little Oreos they have. Because of the cream filling in them, you obviously don't need as much butter. Again, you kind of just get the same consistency that you get from the graham crackers. So just watch that, or any sort of gluten-free cracker cookie. You can use that for a crust. Variations would be really yummy. But again, gluten-free cookies or crackers don't really soak up the butter as much as a non-gluten-free cookie would. So you want to put a little bit less of the butter, and so it might look a little bit more dry, but that is totally normal. And once it's baked and set, it will be just the same. And obviously, if you're making it gluten-free, you just put a gluten-free flour, or you can do like an almond flour. You can do like a mixture of like rice flour, cornstarch, stuff like that. So once our mixture has been creamed, the cream cheese has been creamed with the sugar, we're going to add in 5 eggs, preferably 1 egg at a time, just so that it can incorporate evenly. And you don't need to let it spin or mix for a long time. You just want it to kind of get incorporated, and then you can add the other one. You don't want to mix a cheesecake batter so much. You, oddly enough, try the way that I make it, you want to try to not put as much air in it as you might think. By mixing it on a high speed for a very long time, you're adding a lot of air into the mixture. So I always spin them on a low speed for a little bit of time, and then I only crank it up to high speed once I'm finishing, and I just want to make sure everything's incorporated. So once you added your 5 eggs, again, you just want to scrape the edges of the bowl, because you're most definitely going to have bits of cream cheese and sugar that have not mixed in with the rest of the mixture. And then just spin it a little bit longer to incorporate everything. Once that is incorporated, it is time to add the sour cream and the vanilla. To the batter, I add about half a cup, maybe a little bit more, of sour cream. Adding in the sour cream gives it a really rich texture, really rich flavor. It makes it a lot smoother in your mouth. And I found that the flavor that sour cream adds inside of the cheesecake batter, it makes it taste really good. Almost like the Cheesecake Factory cheesecake, which I love. And then to that, I'm going to add about a teaspoon, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. You can use pure or artificial. Little vanilla, totally fine. So again, once that's combined, and I just did it, you saw for not even 10 seconds, just so that it all combines, I'm going to add about 4 tablespoons of flour. And that is just to make sure that it thickens up a little bit, because the cheesecake batter will take a lot longer to cook if it's a lot thinner. And by taking a lot longer to cook, there's a bigger tendency for it to crack or for it to get brown around the edges, which you kind of don't want in a cheesecake. Doesn't mean it tastes bad, but just when you look at it, most of the time, you don't want So I just mixed that in. And I'm just gonna go around the edges one more time to get the excess flour that went up on the edges incorporated. And just mix it a little more. And that is the cheesecake batter all done. By the time your cheesecake batter is done, your crust should actually be ready to come out of the oven. So I'm just going to take that out so that we can look at it. So this is our crust after being in the oven for about 10 minutes. It will feel soft. If you let it cool for a little bit, it will harden up again. We are going to let it sit out and cool just for a few minutes. You don't want to put the cool cheesecake batter on top of the hot crust right away. So while we're letting that cool, we are going to actually make our sour cream layer that we put on top of the cheesecake. And to do that, I actually have about a cup and a quarter of sour cream. To that, I'm going to add a few tablespoons of lemon juice, or you can also use lime juice. Both are very, very good. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of sugar, just sweeten it up a bit. And then I also like to add zest. This is an optional ingredient. You don't have to. You can do lime zest, you can do lemon zest. It kind of, again, adds a citrusy taste that cuts through the sweetness of the cheesecake. Because again, I don't love my desserts too sweet. So I just zest it. And you don't need a ton of zest to make an impact on the flavor. And so then all we are going to do is just mix it. If you have a bigger bowl, that would probably be better. You don't have to be as...
Could you use zest from other things like oranges?
Oh yeah, that would be amazing. Whatever zest you use, the sour cream layer will kind of take on that aroma, that scent, that flavor. So an orange zest would be amazing. Lemon zest is great. Like I used lime zest, but any sort of citrus fruit, you can use the zest from that and it would be amazing. If you don't like lemons or lemon juice or lime juice, you can also use grapefruit juice inside of it if you would like. You kind of just want some sort of citrus component inside of this top layer so that it gives a different flavor profile to the cheesecake. So that is done. I'm just going to set that side. And then by the time that's done, it's been only like a minute or two, but this is cool enough now that I can put the cheesecake batter into it. I'm just gonna grab a spoon and I'm gonna take my cheesecake batter and I'm just pouring it inside. You can see the consistency, it is thicker, which is great. If it's a little bit thinner than this, that is also totally okay. You just don't want it to be really liquidy. You kind of want it to be able, if you put like, let's say a line on the top, you should want it to be able to hold shape a little bit or slowly sink in. You don't want it to make one flat, even layer on top. That's a little bit too thin.
We're getting comments that it already looks delicious.
Thank you. Thank you. So once that is in, we are going to put it in a large aluminum pan. Yeah, if you have a large roasting dish that you use for dairy, even though it's a roasting dish, you can put it in that as well. I'm just going to grab mine. So this is my roasting dish. And so what you're going to do is just put your cheesecake, your pan right in the center. And the reason you use a large dish like this is because you need something that's large enough to hold the cheesecake in, but that's also large enough so that you can put the water inside so that it can fill up about halfway of the pan. And so what you would do is you would fill this up so that again, it reaches halfway, and then you would put it in the 350-degree oven for about an hour. I have one in the oven that's waiting to come out. It will come out in a few minutes, and in that time, I'm going to show you guys how to make the strawberry coulis that goes on top of the cheesecake. So I'm just gonna put this aside. And you can follow me to the stove.
Karen Bernstein calls dibs on your cheesecake before anybody else does.
So for the strawberry coulis, we have a bunch of strawberries. This is like the average size pack that you would get in a grocery store, just sliced up into halves. You don't want to make the pieces of strawberries too small because when they cook, they naturally break down anyways, and you're going to be smushing them a little bit with the spoon. So it's better to go on the bigger side of cutting your strawberries rather than making them really small. Unless, of course, you don't want any strawberry pieces, then you can cut them into really small chunks.
We have a quick question about the water that was put in.
Wow.
Do you use cold water or boiling water when you put it into the pan?
Good question. I use either hot water or water that you just boiled. You don't want it to be cold. The whole point of the water bath is if you don't add the water bath, the edges of the pan get a lot hotter than the center of the cake does, and it will be a lot hotter for the entire time that it cooks. And so then the edges will be brown. When you look at like a classic New York style cheesecake, and then all you see are like that clean white edge of cheese, that is done by doing a water bath. So when you add hot water or just boiled water, the water that I'm adding has been boiled, it boiled about 10 minutes ago, so it's still hot. By doing that, you kind of keep the edges of the cake at the same temperature as the top of the cake when it's being cooked, so it doesn't overcook on the edges. And so that it all cooks evenly and doesn't get any color. Great question. To the strawberries here, I'm adding about a tablespoon, a little bit more, like a few tablespoons of sugar. And I'm adding about a third of a cup to about half a cup of water. You don't need that much water. You don't need that much sugar. Again, because the cheesecake, even though there isn't a ton of sugar in this recipe for a dessert, it is sweet. And so by not adding a ton of sugar to the strawberries, it again cuts through that sweetness. So
And
I have,
sorry, can you remind us what temperature you're baking the cheesecake at?
I'm baking the cheesecake at 350.
And are you using fresh strawberries or can you use frozen?
That's a good question. I'm using fresh. You can use frozen because you're cooking it anyways, so it really doesn't matter if it's fresh or frozen. It's going to be hot anyways. You can also, don't feel obligated to use the freshest of strawberries. If you have strawberries sitting in your fridge that look a little bit too old to eat, you can definitely put them in here because you're cooking them down anyways. So it's a great way to use up old strawberries that obviously not moldy strawberries, but strawberries are a little too soft and you might not want to use. So I have my strawberries in here on a high heat, and they're just going to cook for about 10 minutes on a high heat before we smush them or move them around a bit. You kind of want them to cook down. So I'm not going to touch that, and I'm going to leave that be.
Can other fruits be used besides strawberries?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do the exact same method for whatever fruits you're using, but blueberries are very, very good. Blackberries are great, raspberries. You can use any type of fruit. I wouldn't use like a citrus fruit, like an orange or a grapefruit. Like I wouldn't do something like that, but any sort of like berry would be very, very good. You can do like a mixture, but yes, any fruit could work. So it is just cooking. And at this point in time, if anyone has any more questions while I'm waiting to get the other cheesecake out of the oven, because it still has to be in there for a couple minutes. I'll talk about the topping. For the topping of the cheesecake, I use whipped cream, and I could not be bothered to make whipped cream from scratch right now. So I just went out and I bought myself one of those pre-made cans of whipped cream. It's super duper easy. It's not supposed to be like the fanciest dessert ever. But if you do make your own homemade whipped cream, a really, really nice, you add like vanilla, and so it can be really nice vanilla whipped cream. You can add, again, if you want like more of a citrus component, you can add this, I wouldn't add the juice, but you can add the zest of a lime, lemon, orange, whatever. That would be very, very good in it as well, to give it that extra citrus component. So these strawberries
we have a question on what the amount of cups of strawberries you used. You said it was one package.
Yeah, I would say it's about, I'm trying to figure it out. It's probably about 4 cups of cut strawberries if you take the halves and put them in a cup, since you obviously can't like pulverize them. But it's about 4 cups of cut up strawberries.
Great. And we got a shout out for your camera person. Who's filming?
That is my dad. I had to force him to film this. So it's very nice that he's doing that because he's not working right now to film me. So it's only been a couple minutes and these strawberries are already starting to soften and break down a bit. And so, yeah, we're just gonna let this continue to cook. And it looks like it's really liquidy and there's a lot of water, but once the strawberries are completely cooked down and you stir it, it will thicken up. If it is a little bit too thin for your liking, again, once it's cooled, it will be thick, but if it's a little bit too cool for your liking, you can add a little bit of cornstarch slurry or a little bit of, you could add flour. I wouldn't add flour right to it because that could make clumps. And for something that you're not baking in the oven, you don't really want clumps. But I would add a cornstarch slurry, a little bit too thin for your liking.
So we have multiple people who are very impressed. I think we're all very impressed with your presentation and would love to know more about your background in baking and where your interest in baking came from.
Yeah, so my interest in baking and cooking in general came from my mom quite a long time ago. And it started by just helping out in the kitchen during dinner, preparing the green beans, doing all that. And then it slowly turned into me wanting to do recipes on my own and starting to do stuff on my own. And so then I really got into baking. That's something that I really enjoyed doing. She kind of made the dinner and I made the dessert. And so then I started with small stuff, and I made, like I would make like puddings, or I would make some other stuff. But then I started to make cheesecakes and creme brulees, and then cooking started to become something that I really liked doing. And then I was on Shop Canada Junior. Did I win? No. Is it because I couldn't taste anything because nothing was kosher? That's what I'm saying to myself. Yes. So that was kind of like the peak of what I love cooking. I still love cooking, but it's kind of taken a back step. But I still love to cook dinner for my family, and I love to make desserts all the time. So it all started from my mom when I was a lot younger. So you can see in it's only been really like a couple minutes, and these strawberries are already starting to soften quite a bit. And the juices are coming out, and it's all starting to be really nice.
Okay, take it out. Let's see.
So now I am actually going to chat. So are there any other questions during this time? I have 5 more minutes until I pull it out to show you what you do with the sour cream layer.
We can keep asking questions. We have a couple more. We have somebody asking if you can add liqueur to, I imagine the strawberries, but maybe to something else.
Yes, you can add like any liqueur, like brandy, or any sort of like liqueur, rum, anything. To the strawberries, that would be very, very good. You can also add it into the actual cheesecake batter to make it into more of like a fun sort of like party cheesecake. That would be really, really good. You can also add it into the sour cream layer. Who really cares? You can add it like everywhere. But yeah, you can add it into the strawberries to make it more of like a liquor sort of strawberry coulis. That would be very, very good.
That sounds great. And we have another question asking about your interest in going to chef school.
Yes, I very much was interested in going to chef school when I was younger. That's like all I wanted to do. But I recently, and by recently I mean like 5 years ago, got into like musical theater and more of the performing arts stuff. And so going and becoming a professional chef or going into cooking school kind of was moved over for the other passion that I had. But I still consider this amazing because I don't have to live 4 years off of walking back in university. And I can hold my own in the kitchen, which is more than a normal college student could say.
Absolutely. And we have some people who would be interested in following if you have a cooking blog.
I should have a cooking blog. My mom's saying I should have a cooking blog. I don't have a cooking blog.
Well, we'll all wait for you. Once you put one up, we'll advertise it.
That's nice. I should. To be honest, I probably would end up being too lazy to put anything onto it after a couple weeks, but that would be very interesting. So we're just going to look at the compote here. It's been not even like 8 minutes, and the strawberries are very, very soft. It is very hot. And so at this point in time, I'm going to let it cool down a little bit. And once it's cooled down a touch, then you can kind of break down the strawberries a little bit more. If you have like one of those potato mashers, you can put that inside and just mush it up a bit. You can just take the back of your spoon and smush up the strawberries a little bit. You can also, if you like a completely smooth mixture, at this point in time, not this point in time, it's really hot, but you can take it and put it in your blender or a food processor, and then you can you can blend it or pulverize it to make it a complete smooth mixture if you don't like the chunks of strawberries inside of sauce that you have. 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes. So 3 more minutes. And no, I'm not. Sorry. My dad's asking if I want to sing, and I'm not going to sing. So we can just enjoy this. I'm just taking my masher and I'm just crushing up the strawberries a little bit. And by doing that, it thickens up the sauce a little bit. It also, I like to say, it makes the strawberries into a little bit more.
We have multiple people wanting you to sing, but we do have another question. What are you going? Are you still in high school? Are you going away to school next year? Kind of what are your plans for the future? What are you thinking about?
I am in grade 12. So I am going away to university next year, and I'm planning on going to school either for musical theater or for classical music, classical singing. And I've applied to a bunch of schools in Canada, like McGill and U of T for classical music. And I applied to a bunch of schools in the States for musical theater, a bunch in New York, a bunch in LA, some in Florida, which is an odd state to go for musical theater, but there's some good schools in there. So I applied to a bunch of schools in the States. My dream, my goal would be to move over to the States to go for school. And we will see how that works out with scholarships, because it's a little bit expensive, but that's okay. So, your music.
We have 2 people who've now asked you outright to sing.
What would I think? Why would I sing that right now? There's a high note in there.
Don't feel pressured. We're totally pressuring you.
That's okay. Did you come? I will be singing, I guess I will be singing Falcon and the Dive, which is a musical song. If you couldn't guess, that's what I like singing. It's a musical song from the musical Scarlet Pimpernel, I believe. It is a great song. I am just going to send my mother the song. And she got it. Okay, so let's go back to this call. And I guess I will now sing it for you guys. Oh my God, look at that. The cheesecake's done. And so I'll put the sour cream later on, and then I will sing for you guys. Because I'm still committed to doing that. I'm still committed. Okay, lucky you. The cheesecake is not done. It's only took a few minutes. So I will be singing now. And this is Falcon the Dive. It ends on a very high note. So if I don't get that high note, just don't comment on it.
Because you haven't.
Because I haven't warmed up. Exactly. I haven't warmed up. Hunt for this man, comb city, every street, every grade. Set a guard at every gate, drag him out. Shut the moment that you find him. Down. Lock up the doors, lock up the city. Such a town, track him down, and be quick about it now. How the devil do I ever prevail when I'm only a man, but I'll never be duped by the scarlet phantom again. I wasn't born to walk on water. I wasn't born to sack and slaughter. But in my soul, I wasn't born to stoop to sword and knuckle under. A man can learn to steal his thunder. A man can learn to work some wonder. And when the gauntlet's down, it's time to rise and climb the sky. And soon the moon will smolder and the winds will dry. Yes, a man grows older, but his soul remains alive. All the trembling stars still glitter, and I will survive. Let my heart grow colder, and as bitter as a falcon in the night. And that's the song. And that's the song. Continuing to service.
We love that. With so many comments. We love it. You're amazing.
Thank you very much. Let's hope the universities think the same.
They will.
Let's hope they think the same. Okay, so at this point in time, I can take out the cheesecake. And normally you don't want to open up the oven and grab out your cheesecake because that can cause the cheesecake to actually split down the center or start to have cracks. But for this method, you do want to take it out just for a little bit to put the sour cream layer on. And what's great is that if your cheesecake, mine hasn't yet, if your cheesecake does start to get cracks on it, by putting the sour cream layer on top, it actually stops anyone from being able to see that your cheesecake is actually cracked. So it's a great way to hide some of the mistakes that we have made and make it seem like we know absolutely, like we know exactly. So I'm putting the sour cream mixture onto the cheesecake, and I'm just with an offset spatula. You can also use a spoon. You're just going to go and spread it all around the edges and the center of the cheesecake. Again, it doesn't have to be a very thick layer. If you like a thick layer, you can obviously make more of the sour cream layer. But I just use it as a little bit of a topper to hide any cracks, but then also to add a little bit of citrus flavor to the cheesecake. Once that sour cream layer is on and you feel like it is thick enough or even enough around the cake, you can take it and stuff it back into the oven. And it's going to go back into the oven at 350 for about another 10 to 15 minutes. So that was an hour at the beginning, and now you're putting it back in the oven, still in the water bath, for about another 10 to 15 minutes. What you're looking for is once the topping is ready, the cheesecake is almost done. It should be done in the 10 to 15. Once the topping starts to almost look like it's separating a little bit from the edges, like you'll start to see it bubble a little bit around the edges, it means it's done. It's set. That's the whole point of cooking it, so that it sets and it doesn't just fall right apart. That's the whole point of cooking anything, I guess. So for the compote, I just smashed some of the strawberries, and we just have a little bit of them here with some liquid. Obviously, I like it when it's a little thinner. If you guys do not like it, again, you can add a cornstarch slurry and just put it over the heat again and just cook it down a little bit until it thickens. Or again, because of the sugar and the liquid from the strawberries, when you put it in the fridge for overnight, it will start to thicken up anyways because of the syrup that the strawberries are sitting in. So once that is done, after 10 to 15 minutes, what you're going to actually do is turn off your oven completely, and you're going to open up the oven like this, just so that there's a little bit of a space, a little bit of an opening, so that air can escape from the oven a little bit quicker. That's the way that you let your cheesecake cool down. You don't want to just grab it out and stuff it right in the fridge, because that will definitely cause it to crack. And if it cracks even more with the sour cream layer on, the sour cream layer is going to go into the center of the cake, and then yeah. So always, once it's off, open it up a little bit, and you just let it sit like that for like 25 minutes, 30 minutes, until it's cooled down like enough for you to be able to enough 30 minutes. I don't know, 30 minutes. That's all you need. And once that's out, you can take it out of the water bath. And I would just wipe up the water a little bit, and then you put it in your fridge. You should put it in your fridge for at least 5 hours. Overnight is always best, but after 5 hours, it should be completely set. At that point, you can serve it. It will last in your fridge if you cover it. It will last in your fridge for about a week and a bit, like a week and a half. If you freeze it, though, at that point, you can keep it for, again, as long as you want. It will last forever in the freezer. So once it has been in the fridge and it has been cooling for either the 5 hours that we talked about or the full overnight cooling, you can take it out, and you can see I did cut myself a slice because I had to make sure that it was okay, because I didn't want the recipe that I made to be bad. And for you guys to be very upset at me when you try to cook it. So what we are going to do is just cut a slice. And it should come off fairly easily from the springform pan. All springform pans are naturally non-stick, so you don't actually need to spray them down with any sort of non-stick coating or parchment paper on. Like, you don't have to do any of that. It should totally come out really easily. The edges too, don't be worried about the edges sticking to the side of the cheesecake. It shouldn't do that whatsoever. And then what I'm going to do is just get a little bit of my strawberry compote. I'm just going to put that on top of the cheesecake. I like the difference between the hot strawberry compote and a cold cheesecake, but obviously you can serve it completely cool. And then I just add a little bit of whipped cream on top, and then it is good to enjoy, and that is your cheesecake with the strawberry coulis compote. And that is that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Eyal. We don't have any more questions right now, but if anybody wants to jump in or even unmute if you want to ask something, please go ahead. This is the time.
I've been told to let you guys know that this is a sugar-free cheesecake, this one. I don't have the actual bag with me, but yeah, but you can, they do have, normally in the organic sugar, the organic aisle, what's it called?
It's called Swerve.
It's called Swerve. It is a sugar substitute, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar. Normally with Splenda, it's like a cup of sugar is 2 tablespoons of Splenda, but this is a cup of sugar is a cup of Swerve. And because there isn't that much sugar in the recipe, you don't need that much of it. And so everything in here, from the crust to the cheesecake batter itself to the topping, all has that Swerve sugar in it, which does have 0 calories. So there's no added sugar to this cheesecake. So
Amazing.
that is that. Thank you. It went a lot better than I thought it would. So